All right, today we're diving into one of the most influential books in all of human history, the Quran. I mean, think about it. Every single day, well over 1 billion people turn to this text for a spiritual guidance, for legal wisdom, and for stories that have been told for centuries.
So what's actually in it? What are its core ideas, its big stories? What's its vision for all of us? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out. We're going to push past all the noise and the headlines and go straight to the source to see what the text itself has to say.
Now, to guide us on this journey, we're using a very specific source. It's a modern, official translation from 2011. And the reason we picked this one is because it's thematic. It's designed to help you grasp the core ideas without getting lost in the weeds, which is perfect for understanding the big picture.
Okay, so we've broken down our exploration into 5 big themes that you see over and over again in the text. First, the idea of it being a book of guidance. Then, the concept of the one true God. After that, we'll get into the stories of the prophets. Then, how it acts as a blueprint for society. And finally, we'll look at the final judgment.
All right, first up, what does the Quran actually say about itself? It's not just a random collection of stories or laws. No, it presents itself as having a very, very clear purpose.
So the text constantly refers to itself as a book sent down, a divine message for all of humanity. And a really key term it uses to describe its own job is furqan. Now, what does that mean? It basically means the criterion, the thing that helps you separate truth from falsehood, right from wrong. So right from the get-go, its whole goal is to be like a moral compass for us in this really complex world.
Okay, now we're getting to the absolute bedrock of the entire text, and that's its concept of God. Seriously, this isn't just one theme among many. It is the foundation that everything else, and I mean everything, is built on. The central pillar here is a concept called tawhid. And what that means is the absolute, non-negotiable oneness of God. The text is so clear on this. God is one, unique, can't be divided. But look, this is way more than just a numbers game, right? The real insight is how this idea completely changes your worldview. It means there are no go-betweens, no lesser gods, no saints you have to pray through. Just a direct, personal line between you and the Creator. This idea, this radical monotheism, is the lens you have to use to understand the entire text.
So how does the text actually describe what God is like? Well, 2 of the most common names you'll see are Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, and they're both about mercy. Let's start with Ar-Rahman. This is a name that's only used for God. A great way to think about it is like the sun. The sun shines on everyone, right? It doesn't care if you're a good person, a bad person, a believer, a non-believer. Its warmth touches everything. That's Ar-Rahman. It's this huge, unconditional mercy that just covers all of creation.
And then you have Ar-Rahim. This also means the most merciful, but there's a really important difference. If Ar-Rahman is the sun shining on the whole world, think of Ar-Rahim as the focused care of a gardener tending to one specific plant, making sure it flourishes. It's a more targeted, responsive kind of mercy. It's often seen as the mercy that's especially for those who have faith. It's a subtle but powerful distinction that shows you just how layered the idea of mercy is in the text.
Okay, so you've got this core message. There's one merciful God. But how do you get that message out to everyone all across the world throughout all of history? Well, the Quran's answer is pretty straightforward. You do it through a long, continuous chain of prophets and messengers.
And a lot of these names are going to sound really familiar. We're talking about figures like Noah, Abraham, Joseph, Moses, even Jesus. They're all presented as crucial links in this one single chain of revelation. And the key thing is, they're all bringing that same core message of tawhid, the oneness of God, to their own people. The Quran then presents Muhammad as the final prophet in this very long line, the one who seals that message for good.
And what's interesting is the text is totally upfront that this is just the highlight reel. It literally says that it's told you about some prophets, but there are many, many others whose stories it hasn't related. So it acknowledges this long, continuous history of divine guidance that goes way beyond just the names mentioned in the book.
So you can get a feel for how these stories are told, let's just take one quick example, the epic story of Moses and Pharaoh. It kicks off with a major confrontation. Moses goes to Pharaoh, who's like the symbol of worldly power and arrogance, and Pharaoh just scoffs. He calls in his best magicians for a huge public showdown. Then comes the challenge. The magicians do their thing, creating these incredible illusions. But then Moses casts his staff, and it becomes a real serpent that literally swallows their illusions whole. It all leads to this incredible escape. They're trapped at the sea, Moses parts the waters, and his people walk through to safety, right before the sea crashes back down on Pharaoh and his army. And you see this theme again and again: faith versus tyranny, divine truth versus worldly illusion.
And see, that's the thing. These stories of the prophets, they aren't just epic tales for entertainment. They're meant to be case studies in morality and justice. And that is a perfect bridge to our next theme, because the Quran takes these lessons and uses them to lay out a very practical blueprint for how to build a just and ethical society.
Now, the scope here is huge. It covers everything. But let's just zoom in on a couple of examples to see the philosophy behind it. Take economics. The text says that if someone owes you money and is struggling, forgiving that debt is better for you. And that's not just, a nice thing to do. It's presented as a core principle to build a compassionate economy and stop people from getting trapped in endless cycles of poverty. Or look at social justice. There are these really strong, repeated warnings against taking advantage of orphans or misusing their property. This puts a massive emphasis on protecting the most vulnerable people in society. It frames their well-being not as an act of charity, but as a sacred duty.
So, okay, we have a guide for how to live, we have a blueprint for a just society, but what's the point of it all? Where is all this heading? And that brings us to our final and maybe most important theme, the idea of ultimate accountability, the day of final judgment.
The core idea here is that this life, right here on Earth, it's a test. The Quran talks about a day when every single one of us will have to answer for our actions, the big stuff, the small stuff, all of it. It describes these divine scales where everything is weighed and nothing, not a single hidden thought or intention gets missed. This idea of ultimate, inescapable accountability, that's really the moral anchor holding the whole thing together. And the results of that judgment? They're described in really intense, vivid detail. On one hand, you have paradise, or Jannah. It's described as a place of total peace and pleasure. Think gardens with rivers flowing through them, wearing fine silks, all the fruit you can eat, and the only sound you hear is the word peace. And then, in complete and total contrast, you have hell, or Jahannam. This is described as a place of intense suffering, scorching fire, boiling water, and being forced to eat from a bitter tree called zakum. These really powerful, contrasting pictures serve as the ultimate warning and the ultimate promise.
So, from its purpose as a guide to its radical idea of one God, the epic stories of the prophets, its detailed blueprint for society, and that final, ultimate judgment, we've really only scratched the surface. But it all leads to one big, final question for you to think about. How does a text from the 7th century, with these specific themes, continue to have such a profound impact on the daily lives, the laws, and the deepest hopes of billions of people all over the world, right now, today?